Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. We've finally had some dry and warm weather in southern Britain. Here's a picture I took last Saturday. It's at Ashridge House, which is just up the road from me. It was a glorious day sitting outside in the May sunshine. Unfortunately, at least in my opinion, it didn't last for long, as can be seen on the sequence here, which runs from 18 GMT Tuesday the 14th. Low pressure is back in charge, and as has often been the case in recent months, it's centred close to southern Britain. So showers or longer spells of rain affecting much of the UK. As I run this, what we see is not a great deal changes. Low pressure just sinks a little bit further south into continental Europe, but further showers, long spells of rain perhaps at times, particularly in southern and central regions. The driest conditions look like they will often be in the north, and that could well be where some of the highest temperatures are. I'll come back to that a little later on. But Saturday the 18th, low pressure there, still keeping the showery theme across the south at least. As I run this through to conclusion, not a great deal changes, although what has happened is winds are now coming in from the east rather than the southwest as they were initially, and it's staying fairly mixed. Still some showers, but we could well be importing some warmer upper level air, as we'll see on this sequence. To start off with, it's actually across the north and the east where the orange shading is. Those the temperatures above average at about 1500 metres aloft, so it's a warm air mass there. Cooler air associated with this low pressure pushing up from the southwest across much of southern and western parts of the United Kingdom. Now, as I run this, what we see is that cooler, somewhat cooler air mixes in for a time, but then later on we start to pull in the yellows and oranges again from continental Europe. So temperatures fluctuating a little bit through the week, but I think a lot's going to be dependent really on the extent of cloud and rain rather than those values aloft. So let's take a quick look at the conditions at the surface. This is a Wednesday at 15 GMT. Showers or long spells of rain there in much of the southern half of the UK. Drier there in the north and brighter too. Forwards to Thursday, it's a similar pattern. Not a great deal of change into the weekend. At this stage, looks pretty decent there across the north. There could be a few showers around, but it's really England and Wales where the wettest conditions are likely to be. There could be some hefty downpours developing at times, so it may put a dampener on the barbecue plans. Into next week, Monday now, still really a greater risk at this point of rain in central and eastern parts of England, drier in the north, so Scotland and Northern Ireland. I don't think the temperatures were necessarily too clear, the temperature profile from those surface charts generated from the GFS, so it's just worth having a quick look at these graphics from the UK V model, because they really emphasise how some of the highest values may well be in the northern half of Scotland. If I just point up to there on Wednesday the 15th, we can see 24 Celsius being shown in northeastern Scotland. It will be quite warm at times further south, but as I said, it's really going to depend on the extent of cloud cover. So when the sun makes an appearance, those temperatures will be climbing even in the south. Forwards to Friday there on the right, and still in northern Scotland, 21, 22 or even maybe 23 Celsius. Some relatively warm conditions there in East Anglia in the southeast too, but the theme for much of the first week is for the driest and warmest conditions to be in the north. So head up to Scotland perhaps if you're hoping to catch a taste of summer. Rainfall totals generated using the ECM and GFS models. These are aggregates in millimetres for days 0 to 5. Interesting because they both reinforce the message, which is that the wettest conditions are likely to be mostly in England and Wales. Some significant amounts of rain there being shown, but I think local variations will be quite large due to the showery nature of a lot of the rainfall. Forwards to the 0 to 10-day charts, the totals have continued stacking up. There's some green there now across England and Wales. It's quite unusual really to see that in central counties. It's often in Wales, the southwest, northwestern parts of Britain, Northern Ireland, where you see the greens developing, indicating high totals. So I think there could well be some fairly muddy conditions developing. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's some localised flooding again, despite it being late May. And also notice the consistency there in terms of the rainfall distribution between the ECM and GFS models. So a distinctly wet picture in much of England and Wales looks likely through the 0 to 10 day period. But as I say, variations probably be fairly large in terms of localities. So how do the deterministic models compare in more general terms as we head towards the end of the first week? GFS, Tuesday the 21st, low pressure there really still centred to the south, high pressure to the north, and as I mentioned already, at this point we're pulling in some warmer air across all parts of the UK from continental Europe. The Canadian model, at the same time, a similar picture, likewise with the icon and the ECM, low pressure down there to the south, high pressure extending its influence across the northern half of the UK. Finally, the UK Met Office global model. It's quite a slack pressure pattern being shown here. Broadly speaking, though, it's a similar one, and I think they all point towards that theme that in southern and central parts of the UK there could well be some hefty downpours, some large amounts of rain, even as we head towards the end of the first week. High pressure from the north being more influential there, but it could be the case that low pressure to the south by this point is starting to weaken, and there's a greater chance of drier and warmer periods. Does that trend continue as we head through the second week? Well, as I say, it's not about the details at this range. It's a case of using the ensemble data to determine the direction of travel more than anything else. And this is the 16-day GEFS plot for London. 850 HPA temperatures across the top, so 1500 metres aloft or thereabouts. The thick purple line, the mean generated by averaging out all the individual runs, stays above the thick black line at least a little bit, the thick black line being a 30-year average. Throughout the second week, there are one or two very warm runs starting to show up later on, but they are outliers, not well supported, just a small number of them. All in all, though, air temperatures at this level above the norm. Now, in terms of rain across the bottom there, it's an ongoing risk. Spikes continue to appear. It's worth noting as well for some big spikes there early on, so supporting a suggestion that there could well be some downpours around, some very heavy rain as a possibility. With that said, the number of spikes isn't so high to point towards washout conditions, far from it, but I would expect there to be a reasonable amount of dry periods, but when the rain does turn up, it could be quite heavy. Perhaps also fewer spikes there through the middle of the second week, although it's not a very strong trend. The 2 metre temperature data tables for London, lots of orange there, daytime maximums, some of the darker orange, so 16s to 20s, 21s to 25. So I don't think temperatures are going to be a big issue. Likewise with the overnight lows. I think hopefully in much of the south we're now past the risk of a ground frost, so the tender plants can be put outside if they haven't already. Up to Manchester, the same general trends there along the top half, likewise along the bottom. Perhaps a few more spikes there later on than there were in on the London plot, but all in all it's a very, very similar story. The 2 metre temperature data tables here tell the same thing. 16s to 20s dominant, so perhaps a little lower than in the London area, but all in all the trends are the same. Up to Glasgow, and once more above average there on the top half, the thick purple line staying above the thick black line. There are a number of cooler runs in the mix, but all in all, when averaged out, the general theme is for temperatures at this level to be a little bit above the norm. The risk of rain perhaps increasing early on after that drier start in the north, so some hints there of a change in the general pattern where through the first week the wettest conditions being in the south, the driest in the north. some suggestions here that the rain risk will be increasing in the northwest of the UK early on in week 2 before perhaps decreasing again later. The 2 metre temperature data tables, nothing too much out of the ordinary here, although the overnight lows are suggesting that ground frost may still be developing on some nights in Scotland, and that's really fairly typical, I think, for this time of year. Greater risk there than in the south. The ECM rain probability forecast charts for the first 3 days of week 2 indicate quite a messy picture. It's difficult to extrapolate too much from them, other than to say that there is that ongoing chance of significant amounts of rain. With that said, the middle and right hand charts do point towards a more typical rain distribution returning, with the greens there in Western Britain and Northern Ireland. Forwards to the following 3 days, again, it's quite difficult to take too much from this other than to say that it looks as though the chance of a rain is still there in all parts of the UK at this point. It doesn't look like a settled picture which the ECM is setting up. The GEFS pressure anomaly chart for Friday the 24th, basically halfway through the second week, suggests a continuation really of the same general pattern which we've had through week 1. That is for high pressure to be centred to the north of the UK. But at this point, there is a positive anomaly showing even in the south, so that high pressure may be extending its influence for a time southwards, leading to a chance of drier conditions in the southern half of UK, perhaps through the middle part of the second week. Is that idea supported by the mean surface level pressure data table for York? Well, yes, probably, although it's not a strong trend. Through the first few days, there is a signal for pressure to be rising. The amount of orange in these columns grows. Those are runs which are forecasting between 1026 and 1040 millibars. The pressure then trends downwards towards the end of the second week, so probably becoming changeable again by that point. So the signal is for somewhat drier conditions to extend southwards through the middle part of the second week, but it's not a very strong one. So putting it all together to summarise, week 1, heavy showers or longer spells of rain, particularly in southern Britain. There could be some real hefty downpours there. Often warmest and driest in the north, and towards the end of the first week, perhaps the amount of showers in the south decreases as low pressure weakens. Week 2, in general, it's looking changeable with further showery periods of rain. There is that chance of a more settled period extending southwards at least through the middle part of the week. Temperatures, though, often above the average, so it will be warm in sunny spells. So there we have it, a very mixed bag of weather. I suspect it could be particularly soggy in parts of southern Britain through the first week, although, as I was emphasising, local variations in rain totals could well be large. Well, not the best of outlooks, I suspect, for many people, but I hope you found this video useful and enjoyed it. If you did, then of course, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. And of course, stay up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.